250,000 people, 100,000 of them children, are under siege in Aleppo, Syria. Bunker buster bombs, cluster munitions, and incendiary weapons are being dropped on them by Russian and Syrian militaries. Does the U.S. have a responsibility to protect civilians and prevent mass casualties on this scale? Governor Pence.
The United States of America needs to begin to exercise strong leadership to protect the vulnerable citizens and over 100,000 children in Aleppo. Hillary Clinton's top priority when she became Secretary of State was the Russian reset. The Russian reset. After the Russian reset, the Russians invaded Ukraine and took over Crimea. And the small and bullying leader of Russia is now dictating terms to the United States to the point where all the United States of America, the greatest nation on earth, just withdraws from talks about a ceasefire while Vladimir Putin puts a missile defense system in Syria while he marshals the forces and begins. Look, we have got to begin to lean into this with strong, broad-shouldered American leadership. It begins by rebuilding our military. And the Russians and the Chinese have been making enormous investments in the military. We have the smallest Navy since 1916. We have the lowest number of troops since the end of the Second World War. We've got to work with the Congress and Donald Trump will to rebuild our military and project American strength in the world. But about Aleppo and about Syria, I truly do believe that what America ought to do right now is to immediately establish safe zones so that families and vulnerable families with children can move out of those areas, work with our Arab partners real time right now to make that happen. And secondly, I just have to tell you that the provocations by Russia need to be met with American strength. And if Russia chooses to be involved and continue, I should say, to be involved in this barbaric attack on civilians in Aleppo, the United States of America should be prepared to use military force to strike military targets of the Assad regime, to prevent them from this humanitarian crisis that is taking place in Aleppo. There's a broad range of other things that we ought to do as well. We ought to deploy a missile defense shield to the Czech Republic and Poland, which Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama pulled back on out of not wanting to offend the Russians back in 2009. We've just got to have American strength on the world stage. And when Donald Trump becomes president of the United States, the Russians and other countries in the world will know they're dealing with a strong American president.
Senator Hillary and I also agree that the establishment of a humanitarian zone in northern Syria with the provision of international human aid consistent with the UN Security Council resolution that was passed in February 2014 would be a very, very good idea. And Hillary also has the ability to stand up to Russia in a way that this ticket does not. Donald Trump again and again has praised Vladimir Putin, and it's clear that he has business dealings with Russian oligarchs who are very connected to Putin. The Trump campaign management team had to be fired a month or so ago because of those shadowy connections with pro-Putin forces. Governor Pence made the odd claim. He said, inarguably, Vladimir Putin is a better leader than President Obama. Vladimir Putin's run his economy into the ground. He persecutes LGBT folks and journalists. If you don't know the difference between dictatorship and leadership, then you got to go back to a 5th grade civics class. I tell you what offends me. Governor Pence just said that Donald Trump will rebuild the military. No, he won't. Donald Trump is avoiding paying taxes. The New York Times story, and we need to get this, but the New York Times story suggested that he probably didn't pay taxes for about 18 years starting in 1995. Those years included the years of 9/11. So get this. On 9/11, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump's hometown was attacked by the worst terrorist attack in the history of the United States. Young men and women signed up to serve in the military to fight terrorism. Hillary Clinton went to Washington to get funds to rebuild her city and protect first responders. But Donald Trump was fighting a very different fight. It was a fight to avoid paying taxes so that he wouldn't support the fight against terror. He wouldn't support troops. He wouldn't support. This is important, Elaine. When a guy running for president will not support the troops, not support veterans, not support teachers, that's really important. And I said about Aleppo, we do agree. The notion is we have to create a humanitarian zone in northern Syria. It's very important.
Governor Pence, you had mentioned no-fly zone. Where would you propose setting up a safe zone specifically? How would you keep it safe?
Well, first and foremost, Donald Trump supports our troops. Donald Trump supports our veterans.
He won't pay taxes.
Donald Trump has paid all the taxes that he's... Do you not take deductions?
Gentlemen, this
How does that work?
about Syria. I'd like to ask
But it is about our troops.
Senator, honestly,
it is about
this,
our troops.
I understand why you want to change it. I understand why you want to change the subject. I understand why you want to change the subject. And let me be very clear on this Russian thing. The larger question here on
Do you think Donald Trump is smart to not pay taxes?
What we're dealing with is there's an old proverb that says the Russian bear never dies, it just hibernates. And the truth of the matter is the weak and feckless foreign policy of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama has awakened an aggression in Russia that first appeared a few years ago with their move in Georgia, now their move into Crimea, now their move into the wider Middle East. And all the while, all we do is fold our arms and say we're not having talks anymore. To answer your question, we just need American strength. We need to marshal the resources of our allies in the region, and in the immediate, we need to act now to get people out of harm's way.
And exactly how would those safe zones work? How would they remain safe?
The safe zones would have to be, as the senator said, there's already a framework for this that's been recognized by the international community. But the United States of America needs to be prepared to work with our allies in the region to create a route for safe passage, and then to protect people in those areas, including with a no-fly zone. But look, this is very tough stuff. I served on the Foreign Affairs Committee for a decade. I traveled in and out of that region for 10 years. I saw what the American soldier won in Operation Iraqi Freedom, and to see the weak and feckless leadership that Hillary Clinton was the architect of in the foreign policy of the Obama administration.
Let me come back and talk about...
is deeply troubling to me. That will all change
talk about
the day
the
Donald
things
Trump
that Governor
becomes
Pence
president
doesn't
of the
want to
United
acknowledge, Elaine. He doesn't want to acknowledge that we stopped the Iranian nuclear weapons program. He doesn't want to acknowledge that Hillary was part of the team that got bin Laden. He doesn't want to acknowledge that it's a good thing, not a bad thing. That it's a good thing, not a bad thing, that we're down from 175,000 troops deployed overseas to 15,000. But let me tell you what will really make the Middle East dangerous. Donald Trump's idea that more nations should get nuclear weapons. Saudi Arabia, Japan, South Korea. Ronald Reagan said something really interesting about nuclear proliferation back in the 1980s. He said the problem with nuclear proliferation is that some fool or maniac could trigger a catastrophic event. And I think that's who Governor Pence's running mate is, exactly who President Reagan warned us about.
Senator, that was even beneath you and Hillary Clinton, and that's pretty low.
But do you think we should have more nuclear weapons in the world will make us safer?
Senator, Ronald Reagan also said nuclear war should never be fought because it can never be won. And the United States of America needs to make investments in modernizing our nuclear force for both deterrence
Donald Trump's claim that more nations should get nuclear
to our allies. But let me go back to this Iran thing. I mean, he keeps saying that that Hillary Clinton, who started the deal with the Iranians, prevented Iran from getting a nuclear weapon.
That's what the Israeli head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is saying right now, Governor Pence.
That's not what Israel thinks.
Gadi Eisenkot, you can go check it.
You wouldn't necessarily know that. I know you boycotted Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech.
No, I visited him in his office. I visited him in his office.
You boycotted the speech. The point is, what this so-called Iran deal did was essentially guarantee. I mean, when I was in Congress, I fought hard on a bipartisan basis with Republican and Democrat members to move forward the toughest sanctions, literally in the history of the United States against Iran.
And then Hillary used them.
We were bringing them to heel, but the goal was always that we would only lift the sanctions if Iran permanently renounced their nuclear ambitions.
Let me just mention one
thing. Elaine, let me finish a sentence.
Mm-hmm.
They have not renounced their nuclear ambitions, and when the deal's period runs out, there's no limitation on them obtaining weapons. That and the fact that they got $1.7 billion in a ransom payment.
We need to talk about Russia very quickly,
just astonishing to the American people.
6 times tonight, I have said to Governor Pence, I can't imagine how you can defend your running mate's position on one issue after the next. And in all 6 cases, he's refused to defend his running mate's.
No, don't put words in my mouth.
All right.
And yet, he is asking everybody to vote for somebody that he cannot defend. And I just think that should be underlined.